In the first 10 seconds, the truth was already sealed. Humanity entered the galaxy quietly, without weapons blazing or flags raised high, and that silence would become the greatest mistake the universe ever made. The deep space vessel HSS Wayfarer drifted through the dark like a forgotten thought. It was not large by galactic standards, barely more than a thin silver shape wrapped in heat shielding and patched metal. Inside, a crew of 12 humans watched their instruments in uneasy silence. They were explorers, not soldiers. Scientists, engineers, and pilots sent far beyond known space to answer a single question that had haunted Earth for centuries. Are we alone? Commander Elena Cross stood at the center of the bridge, hands folded behind her back. She had gray beginning to show in her hair and eyes that had learned how to stay calm in disaster. She had crossed asteroid storms, survived reactor failures, and watched stars die from observation decks. Still, nothing prepared her for what the sensors were now screaming. "We're not alone," said Jonah Reed, the navigation officer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Commander, there are ships everywhere." The main display bloomed with light. Thousands of signals appeared at once. Enormous structures drifted in perfect formation. Some vessels were longer than cities, wrapped in glowing rings and flowing energy fields. Others moved like living creatures, bending space gently as they passed. Traffic lanes glowed like rivers of light stretching across the void. Elena felt her breath catch. Confirm location. Jonah swallowed. "We're not in mapped space. This is a populated region. Heavily populated." First contact had arrived, not with a single ship, but with a civilization so vast it barely noticed newcomers. Before anyone could speak again, alarms chimed softly. Not weapons. Scans. "They're analyzing us," said Dr. Malik Arun, the science lead. "Multiple spectra. Non-aggressive." A beam of pale light washed over the Wayfarer. The ship shuddered, but held. Elena straightened. "Open all channels. Identify us." Seconds passed. Then a signal answered. It was not dramatic. No booming voice. No threat. It was a notification. Unregistered vessel detected. Please submit species identification and origin. Processing time. Standard. The bridge went silent. Jonah blinked. That's it. Dr. Arun frowned. No warning. No curiosity. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. Send the data. They transmitted Earth's location, humanity's name, and their purpose. Peaceful exploration. Scientific curiosity. Hope. The reply came almost instantly. Species. Unlisted. Development status. Minor. Risk assessment. Negligible. Negligible. The word echoed in Elena's mind. A new message followed, almost as an afterthought. You may continue transit. Please avoid restricted zones. And just like that, the attention vanished. The massive fleets resumed their motion. The energy beams shifted away. No escort arrived. No questions followed. Humanity had been noticed only long enough to be dismissed. "They don't care," Jonah said softly. Elena nodded. "No. We're background noise." The Wayfarer continued forward, drifting through the arteries of a galactic civilization older than anything Earth had ever imagined. Stations larger than moons floated in silence. Automated traffic flowed with flawless efficiency. Alien species moved through space in elegant patterns, each following rules humanity had never seen before. No one stopped them. No one watched them. On a distant administrative station made of layered crystal and dark metal, a minor clerk named Terrelvon scanned thousands of incoming reports. His species had 4 eyes and a mind trained for order. He paused only briefly on one file. Unlisted species. Single vessel. Low output. No strategic value. He tagged it and moved on. To him, it was just another line in an endless stream of data. Back aboard the Wayfarer, the mood had shifted from wonder to unease. "This isn't first contact," Dr. Arun said quietly. "This is irrelevance." Elena looked at the stars beyond the hull. "They've seen thousands of species. We're just late to the party. What do we do now? Jonah asked. Elena did not answer immediately. She watched a distant fleet jump to faster than light in a silent cascade that bent reality itself. Their technology was clean, refined, perfected over millennia. Human technology was not. Human technology was stubborn. We observe, she said at last. We learn. And we go home. The Wayfarer spent weeks drifting through the outer edges of galactic space. They scanned energy systems they barely understood. They recorded alien engineering that defied known physics. They watched trade routes operate with mechanical fairness and absolute indifference. No wars. No chaos. No passion. This civilization values stability above all else, Dr. Arun concluded. Efficiency, predictability, and individuality. Jonah asked. Arun shook his head. Minimized. That night, Elena recorded her private log. The galaxy is vast beyond comprehension. It is orderly, controlled, and it does not see us as a threat or a curiosity. We are insects walking through a machine. When the Wayfarer finally turned back toward home, no one tried to stop them. No one asked what they had learned. No one warned them of danger. Humanity left the galactic stage the same way it entered, quietly. The return to Earth took months. When Elena stood before the Planetary Council, the room was filled with leaders, scientists, and military observers. Every human system was watching. She told them everything. She showed them the data, the fleets, the classifications, and the word negligible. The silence that followed was heavy. They don't see us as enemies, one council member said carefully. That's good news. Elena looked at them, her voice steady but sharp. No. It's worse. She paused. They don't see us at all. Across Earth, reactions were immediate. Fear, anger, denial. Then something deeper began to rise. A quiet fire that had driven humanity since the first stone tool struck flint. If the galaxy would not acknowledge them, humanity would not beg. They would prepare. On a forgotten station in conquered space, Terrelvon archived another day's work. The human file remained untouched, buried under trillions of others. He did not notice the small annotation added by an automated system. Species displays unusually high adaptability markers. Long-term projections unavailable. The galaxy slept, confident in its systems. And far away, on a restless blue world, humanity began to plan. Humanity did not panic. That surprised even themselves. After the Wayfarer's report spread across Earth, there were no riots in the streets, no collapse of governments, no desperate prayers sent into space. Instead, something older and quieter took hold. A collective understanding settled into human minds like a weight and a challenge. They had been measured. They had been found lacking. And humans had never accepted that verdict for long. Within months, Earth changed direction. Funding that once went to luxury colonies and political projects was redirected. Research stations multiplied. Old rivalries between nations softened, not erased, but set aside with gritted teeth and shared purpose. For the first time in generations, humanity faced a threat that could not be argued with, intimidated, or negotiated away. Indifference. Commander Elena Cross watched it unfold from a quiet office overlooking Earth's orbit. She had resigned her command, not out of shame, but because she was needed elsewhere. She now sat at the center of the Unified Development Council, a temporary body created to answer one question. How did a species ignored by the galaxy become impossible to ignore? We don't beat them by copying them, said Professor Lena Okoye, a systems engineer whose hands never stopped moving when she spoke. That's what they expect. That's what they're optimized to handle. Around the table sat scientists, soldiers, economists, and philosophers. The best minds Earth could gather. They have stability, Lena continued. We have chaos. We adapt faster because we have to. Admiral Marcus Hale, a veteran of orbital defense forces, nodded slowly. Their ships are stronger. Their numbers are bigger. But everything they build assumes no one will break the rules. Elena leaned forward. And humans? Marcus smiled thinly. We break rules for breakfast. The council approved the plan unanimously. They called it Project Ascent. It was not a single weapon or ship. It was a philosophy. Human technology stopped chasing perfection. Instead, it embraced speed, redundancy, and creative failure. Ships were built to be repaired mid-battle. AI systems were designed to argue, not obey blindly. Human crews trained in environments that simulated chaos, random failures, impossible odds, moral dilemmas. While the galaxy built systems that never failed, humanity built systems that survived failure. Years passed. To the Galactic Conclave, nothing changed. Humanity remained classified as a minor species, far from trade lanes and political centers. Their files gathered dust. No patrols were assigned. No observers watched Earth. That blind spot grew wider every year. On the frontier station threshold, now expanded into a proper outpost, Ambassador Jonah Reed, older, sharper, and far more tired, received visitors for the first time in years. Not officials. Merchants. They were small-time traders from minor species, curious about the strange newcomers who built stations quickly and paid fairly. Humans welcomed them. Listened. Learned. Humans always listened. Jonah noticed patterns others missed. Trade routes that failed under pressure. Supply chains that collapsed if delayed by minutes. Entire sectors dependent on perfect timing. Fragile perfection. Meanwhile, Dr. Malik Arun led biological research that quietly terrified everyone involved. Humans, it turned out, were absurd by galactic standards. They healed faster. They functioned under gravity that crushed other species. Their immune systems were violent, adaptive things that treated illness like war. Their endurance stunned visiting traders, who watched humans work for hours without rest. One alien engineer reportedly fainted after trying to keep pace with a human repair crew. These reports were logged. They were never escalated. On a distant administrative world, Terrelvon noticed an increase in human-related data traffic. Trade manifests. Construction permits. Resource requests. He frowned. That's unusual, he muttered. He flagged the file for review. Weeks later, the response came back. Low priority. Developmental species often display brief growth surges. Satisfied, his supervisor closed the case. Humanity kept building. The first new generation human ships were launched quietly. They were smaller than conclave cruisers, uglier, and far less elegant. But they jumped faster, turned harder, and when damaged, they did not retreat, they adapted. Pilots trained to fight blind. Engineers trained to reroute power through burned systems. Commanders trained to make decisions with incomplete information. Human children learned the truth in school. The galaxy existed. It did not care. That knowledge did not break them. It sharpened them. The turning point came 15 years after first contact. A border conflict erupted between two minor conclave member species. It was small by galactic standards, trade disputes, station blockades, limited skirmishes. The conclave bureaucracy moved slowly, drowning the issue in procedure. Threshold sat nearby. Human convoys were caught in the disruption. Supplies delayed. Lives at risk. Jonah sent requests. They were denied. Administrative backlog, the response said. For the first time, humanity did not ask again. A human task group entered the conflict zone under civilian codes. No weapons powered. No threats made. They studied the situation for exactly 6 hours. Then they acted. Human ships slipped through patrol gaps no one believed mattered. They rerouted energy flows on a shared station, forcing both sides into blackout without firing a shot. Human diplomats transmitted direct messages, offering food, repairs, and mediation. But with a condition. The fighting stopped. Confused and exhausted, the alien factions agreed. Within days, the conflict ended. Lives saved. Trade restored. The conclave noticed, not because humans had acted, but because the system had resolved itself without permission. An inquiry was opened. A junior analyst reviewed the data and frowned. "Who authorized this?" she asked. The answer came back quickly. No one. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Conclave encountered a solution it did not design. Humanity's file was pulled from archive. On Terrelvon's screen, new alerts flashed. Species 4, 417C activity exceeding projections. He stared at the data, all four eyes wide. "This isn't a surge," he whispered. Far away, Elena Cross stood aboard a new human vessel, watching stars stretch into lines as they jumped. "They still don't understand," she said softly. No one replied. The galaxy had begun to feel something unfamiliar. A disturbance. The Galactic Conclave did not panic either. That was its second mistake. When the inquiry into the border conflict concluded, the official report was clean, calm, and deeply wrong. It stated that the resolution had occurred due to localized negotiation efficiencies and temporary behavioral anomalies among developing species. Humanity's involvement was reduced to a footnote. A curiosity. Nothing more. The conclave had existed for over 12,000 years. In that time, it had learned one dangerous habit: trusting its own systems more than reality. On Threshold Station, Ambassador Jonah Reed read the report in silence. His face showed no anger, only quiet understanding. "They corrected the numbers to fit their expectations," he said. Dr. Malik Haroun nodded. "They always do. If the data doesn't make sense, they assume the data is wrong." Jonah leaned back. "Then we'll give them more data." Threshold no longer looked like an outpost. It had grown into a living structure, modular and asymmetrical. Conclave stations favored symmetry and balance. Human stations grew like coral. Wherever there was need, something was added. Alien traders now visited openly. Some stayed. They learned quickly that humans did not dominate conversations. They asked questions. They shared meals. They listened to stories. They built trust in ways no conclave protocol measured. One trader, a six-limbed being named Keshvar, watched humans work during a hull breach caused by a micrometeor strike. Emergency alarms blared. Atmosphere vented. Humans ran toward the breach. They sealed it with improvised materials, rerouted oxygen through damaged conduits, and laughed afterward, not because it was funny, but because laughter burned off fear. Keshvar recorded the incident. His report was flagged as anecdotal. Elsewhere, humanity tested something more dangerous: information warfare. Conclave systems relied on transparency and rigid trust. Data moved freely because deception was rare. Humans exploited that without lying. They released complete, accurate data, too much of it. Human research logs flooded public networks. Studies on human biology. Engineering notes. Cultural behavior analysis. Psychological adaptability. The sheer volume overwhelmed conclave analysts. When everything was available, nothing was prioritized. That had always worked before, until human volunteers began joining conclave civilian projects. Construction. Logistics. Crisis response. Humans outperformed expectations. Not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they adapted faster than the systems could account for. On a medical station orbiting a dying star, a reactor failure threatened evacuation timelines. Conclave evacuation algorithms predicted a 38% casualty rate. A human emergency coordinator rewrote the plan in real time. Casualties dropped to 3%. The station commander filed a report. It was buried. Still, small ripples spread. Some conclave species began requesting human crews. Quietly, privately. The phrase human-rated solution entered fringe technical circles. It meant, it works even when everything goes wrong. Terrelvon felt the pressure mounting in his cramped office. Files stacked faster than he could process them. The human classification file now contained more annotations than most mid-tier species. He requested a formal review. The answer came back with a delay. Unnecessary. Projected threat remains minimal. He stared at the screen. They don't see the pattern, he muttered. One night, driven by something dangerously close to curiosity, Terelvon accessed restricted projections. He ran simulations using human adaptability metrics. The results made his blood run cold. In controlled systems, humans ranked low. In unstable systems, they dominated. Humans did not win by strength or numbers. They won by refusing to collapse. He saved the data, then hesitated. Reporting it would end his career. Maybe worse. He archived it instead, encrypted, hidden. A mistake he would one day regret. The real breaking point came not with war, but with disaster. A conclave megastructure known as Axis Spire suffered a cascading failure after a rare stellar surge. Billions of lives were at risk. Automated systems conflicted. Bureaucratic approval chains locked decision-making. Response time slowed to fatal levels. Human ships were nearby. They did not wait for permission. Human engineers boarded burning platforms. Human pilots flew evacuation routes manually through radiation storms. Human medics treated species they had never seen before, improvising based on shared biology rather than protocol. The casualty count stabilized, then dropped. For the first time in recorded conclave history, a disaster resolved faster than predicted. And the conclave noticed. Emergency councils convened. Analysts compared projections with outcomes. The common variable appeared again and again. Humans. Impossible, one senior official said. They lack the infrastructure. They lack the authority, another added. But they have results, a third replied. For the first time, the conclave issued a direct inquiry to Earth. Not a form. A message. Elena Cross stood in the command chamber of humanity's newest ship, HSS Resolute, when the signal arrived. It was translated cleanly, carefully, requesting clarification of human operational capabilities. Elena smiled, a small, tired smile. They're asking the wrong question, she said. She authorized the response. Humanity does not possess special capabilities. Humanity possesses special behavior. The reply took longer this time. Behind closed doors, debates raged. Some conclave leaders argued for restrictions. Others for observation. A few, dangerously perceptive, argued for partnership. Humanity, for its part, did not slow down. They expanded training academies for mixed-species crews. They shared disaster response techniques openly. They continued to solve problems no one else wanted. They never demanded recognition. That terrified the conclave more than aggression ever could. Terelvon watched the debates from afar, his encrypted file burning in his thoughts. He finally understood. Humans were not rising against the galaxy. They were rising through it. And systems built to resist force had no defense against that. When the conclave finally scheduled a formal reassessment of species 417C, it was not out of generosity. It was out of fear they could no longer ignore. The formal reassessment of humanity was scheduled with all the gravity the Galactic conclave could summon. That alone was unprecedented. Species reassessments usually happened quietly, buried in committees and subcommittees, resolved over centuries. Humanity's reassessment was different. It was broadcast internally, observed, debated in real time by minds that had not felt uncertainty in thousands of years. And humanity was invited to attend. Elena Cross stood at the center of the human delegation chamber aboard HSS Resolute. Around her were diplomats, engineers, medics, and military advisors, not because they intended to threaten, but because they represented what humanity had become. Flexible, unified, ready. The conclave chamber was vast beyond description. It existed partly in physical space, partly in layered dimensions of data and light. Representatives from dozens of species appeared as holograms, projections, or embodied avatars. Some were ancient. Some were young by galactic standards. All of them were watching. For the first time, humanity was not background noise. Species 417C, a neutral voice announced. Designation: humans. Origin: Sol system. Developmental status under review. Elena stepped forward. We acknowledge the review, she said calmly. And we appreciate the opportunity to speak. A ripple of reaction moved through the chamber. Appreciation was not standard protocol. You may present your case, the voice replied. Elena did not begin with speeches or demands. She began with records. Human disaster response timelines. Comparative survival rates. Case studies where human involvement had altered outcomes across multiple systems. She showed no exaggeration. No emotional appeal. Just results. We do not claim superiority, she said. We claim responsibility. A representative from a high-tier conclave species interrupted. Its voice was sharp, metallic. Your actions bypassed established authority. You violated procedural stability. Yes, Elena replied without hesitation. Because people were dying. Murmurs spread. Another voice followed, older and colder. Your species operates inefficiently. Emotionally. Without adherence to optimized systems. Elena nodded. Correct. Your systems assume optimal conditions. Ours assume failure. Silence fell. That was not an argument the conclave was prepared for. A third representative spoke, quieter but more dangerous. Are you suggesting the conclave is flawed? Elena met the projection's gaze. I'm suggesting it was built by species that eventually forgot what it was like to struggle. That should have ended the session. Instead, something extraordinary happened. A minor administrative voice requested the floor. Terrelvon appeared in the chamber, smaller than most, visibly nervous. He had not slept in days. His encrypted file pulsed in his grasp. I request permission to submit supplementary analysis, he said. The chamber hesitated. Permission was granted. Terrelvon transmitted his hidden simulations. The chamber exploded with data. Projected outcomes where human adaptability was introduced into unstable systems. Crisis curves bending. Collapse points delaying, or disappearing entirely. Scenarios where conclave-perfect systems failed catastrophically, while human-led hybrid responses survived. This data was withheld, a senior official accused. Terrelvon lowered his eyes. Yes. Why? Because it did not fit existing models, he answered honestly. And because I was afraid. The chamber reeled, not from the data, but from the admission. Elena watched quietly. This was not her moment. This was the system confronting itself. Debate erupted. Some species argued humans were a destabilizing force. Others countered that stagnation was the true threat. The conclave's greatest strength, order, was suddenly framed as its greatest weakness. After what felt like hours, the neutral voice returned. Humans, it said, your species presents an anomaly. Elena inclined her head. We've been told that before. A pause. Then. The conclave proposes a trial integration. Whispers surged. Humans will be granted provisional operational authority in designated crisis zones. Under observation. Under restriction. Elena did not smile. And if we refuse? Then classification remains unchanged, the voice replied. Elena looked at her team. Then back at the chamber. We accept, she said. On one condition. Conditions were rarely allowed. State it. We do not operate as tools, Elena said. We operate as partners. The chamber stalled. At last, the voice answered. Condition noted. Humanity had crossed a line. The trial began within months. Crisis zones flared across conclave space, natural disasters, infrastructure collapses, social unrest. Humans were deployed alongside conclave units. The results were undeniable. Where conclave teams waited for authorization, humans acted. Where conclave units froze when systems contradicted, humans improvised. They shared leadership, took risks, failed forward. Other species began to imitate human methods. That scared the conclave more than any single success. On one world, a conclave commander publicly deferred to a human crisis lead. The footage spread faster than any official report. For the first time in its long history, the conclave was changing, not by decree, but by example. And change bred resistance. A coalition of high-tier species filed a formal objection. They accused humanity of cultural contamination, of destabilizing ancient balances. They demanded the trial end. The conclave hesitated. Then the unthinkable happened. A coordinated systems failure struck a core world, one of the conclave's oldest and most protected members. Power grids collapsed. Defense networks conflicted. Evacuation protocols locked themselves. Billions at risk. Human teams were closest. The conclave froze. Authorization chains tangled. Elena received the signal. Not a command. A question. Can you handle this? She answered without delay. Yes. Human ships jumped before approval arrived. The galaxy held its breath. If humanity failed, they would be blamed. If they succeeded, nothing would ever be the same. The core world was burning. From orbit, the planet looked calm, blue oceans, wide continents, soft cloud bands drifting peacefully. But every human sensor told a different story. Power grids were collapsing in waves. Atmospheric processors were desynchronizing. Orbital traffic was frozen mid-pattern, ships locked in safety loops they could not exit. For a conclave core world, this was unthinkable. For humans, it was familiar. Multiple cascading failures, said Chief Engineer Rhea Morales, her fingers flying over a holographic display. Their systems are too clean. One fault propagates everywhere. Elena Cross stood beside her, watching data scroll past faster than most species could read. How long? Elena asked. Before mass casualties. Rhea exhaled. 6 hours. Maybe less. No conclave command had been issued yet. No unified response. The bureaucracy was still arguing about authority. Elena made the call. All human units, she said calmly. We act now. Priority is lives, not infrastructure. Break protocols if you must. The order spread instantly. Human ships peeled away from formation and plunged toward the planet. They did not request docking clearance. They forced manual overrides, using adaptive code written specifically for moments like this. Conclave traffic control protested. Human pilots ignored it. On the surface, human responders landed in cities already panicking. Alien civilians stared in confusion as unfamiliar figures moved with urgency but not fear. Humans did not shout orders. They helped. They carried the injured. They rerouted power by hand. They shut down failing systems instead of trying to save them, isolating damage the conclave had never planned for. Why are you turning sections off? A conclave systems overseer demanded. Because they're killing people, Rhea replied bluntly. Human medics treated species with entirely different biology, adapting techniques on the fly. When they did not know, they experimented carefully, learning in minutes what conclave manuals took decades to approve. In orbit, things grew worse. A defense lattice misfired, targeting its own satellites. Automated systems refused shutdown commands due to conflicting authorization hierarchies. Human Commander Aiden Shaw watched the chaos unfold on his tactical display. Permission to disable the lattice manually, he said. That would violate, a conclave officer began. Aiden cut the channel. His ship surged forward, absorbing fire meant for no enemy at all. Shields flared. Hull plates burned. Human engineers rerouted power through damaged sections, keeping the ship alive through sheer refusal to fail. Aiden's voice stayed calm. Lattice disabled. The sky above the planet went dark and safe. On the ground, the casualty curve finally bent. Not stopped. Bent. That was enough. Hours later, as fires died and systems stabilized into crude but functional states, the conclave finally issued its command. Human units are authorized to continue. The message arrived too late to matter. Elena stood in a ruined city square, watching alien children drink water handed to them by human soldiers. No fear. Just exhaustion and relief. A conclave representative approached her, posture stiff, voice unsteady. "You acted without permission," it said. Elena met its gaze. "People lived because we did." The representative hesitated. "Yes," it admitted. "They did." Across conclave space, the data exploded. Projections revised. Assumptions shattered. The core truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity had done what the conclave could not. Not through power. Through choice. In the Great Chamber, the conclave reconvened in emergency session. Arguments flared, louder than any in recorded history. "They are dangerous," one voice insisted. "They undermine order." "They preserve life," another countered. Which was the point of order to begin with? Terrelvon watched silently, his career already in ruins, his conscience strangely light. He knew the answer before it was spoken. The neutral voice rose above the chaos. "Species 4, 417C, it announced. "Humans. Your classification is no longer accurate." The chamber waited. "You are hereby redesignated as an adaptive core species." The words echoed. A status that did not exist before. Created for them. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, not in triumph, but in release. The galaxy had finally looked directly at humanity, and what it saw frightened it. Not because humans were stronger, but because they would act again. Without waiting. Recognition did not bring peace. It brought fear. The moment humanity was labeled an adaptive core species, the balance of the galaxy shifted. The conclave had not simply upgraded a classification, it had admitted that its ancient measurements were incomplete. Worse, that a young species had exposed the flaw. For many member civilizations, that was unacceptable. In quiet chambers and encrypted channels, resistance formed. They called themselves the Stability Compact, old, powerful species whose influence shaped conclave law for millennia. They had built their dominance on predictability, on systems that rewarded patience and punished deviation. Humans were deviation made flesh. "They will unravel everything," one compact leader warned. "They already have," another replied. Their solution was not war. War was too visible, too messy. They chose containment. Across conclave space, subtle changes appeared. Human-led operations were delayed. Resource shipments were rerouted. Joint missions were reassigned at the last moment. Not denied, just slowed. Bureaucracy, sharpened into a weapon. On threshold, Jonah Reed watched approval requests time out one by one. Supplies meant for disaster zones arrived days late. Mixed species crews were quietly dissolved. "They're trying to bury us," Jonah said. Elena Cross nodded. "They don't understand what we actually are." Humanity adapted. They always did. Human teams decentralized. They stopped relying on conclave approval chains entirely. Instead, they built trust networks, relationships between species, crews, and stations that bypassed formal authority. When crises erupted, calls did not go to the conclave. They went to humans. A mining colony collapsed on the fringe. A trade station lost life support. A refugee convoy was stranded between systems. Humans arrived before official responders. Not because they were ordered to. Because someone asked. The Stability Compact panicked. They accelerated their plan. A manufactured crisis was seeded, small at first, then cascading. A network failure spread across multiple sectors, designed to overwhelm adaptive responses and prove that humans caused instability. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity recognized the pattern in minutes. "This isn't random," said Dr. Malik Arun, studying the data. "This is engineered complexity." Elena's eyes hardened. Then they've finally made a mistake. Human analysts did something no conclave system would allow. They assumed malicious intent. Human countermeasures unfolded silently. Teams infiltrated damaged networks, not to fix them, but to observe. They traced fault signatures back through layers of abstraction, through automated decisions and legal firewalls. The truth surfaced. The Stability Compact had been pulling the strings. Elena authorized full disclosure. Humanity released everything. The proof. The logs. The simulations. The intent. No accusations. No threats. Just facts. The galaxy reacted violently. Species that had trusted the Compact felt betrayed. Minor civilizations realized they had been controlled for centuries under the guise of stability. Even high-tier members recoiled. The Compact tried to deny it. Then human mediators arrived on their worlds. Not soldiers. Observers. "You don't need to fear us," Elena told the Conclave in a broadcast heard across millions of systems. "But you do need to understand us." She paused. "Our strength is not our ships. Not our biology. Not our technology." The camera lingered on her calm face. "Our strength is that we choose responsibility over permission." Silence followed. The Stability Compact dissolved within weeks, undone not by force, but by exposure. The Conclave restructured itself in the aftermath. Emergency powers were curtailed. Crisis authority was decentralized. Adaptive response doctrines, based on human models, were adopted galaxy-wide. Humanity did not rule. They enabled. On a quiet station overlooking a blue-white star, Terelvon watched human and alien children train together in emergency response drills. Laughter echoed through halls once silent with order. He finally understood. The Conclave had spent 12,000 years building a civilization that could not fail. Humanity had spent all of history learning how to stand back up. And that made all the difference. Far across the galaxy, a message circulated through countless networks, translated into thousands of languages. If humans are present, survival odds increase. That was when the galaxy realized the truth. Humans were not a military superpower. They were something far more dangerous. They were the species you wanted beside you when everything went wrong. The galaxy learned a new habit. It began to wait for humans. Not in fear. Not in submission. But in hope. When warning signals flashed, when stars flared unpredictably, when ancient machines failed, when societies teetered on the edge of collapse, the first question was no longer, what does the Conclave decide? It became something simpler. Are the humans coming? Humanity never announced itself as a leader. There was no throne world, no flag planted at the center of galactic space. Earth remained a small blue planet on the edge of mapped influence. Human stations were still uneven, modular, imperfect. But everywhere they went, systems changed. Crisis response academies trained mixed-species teams using human doctrine. Conclave simulations were rewritten to include failure as a starting assumption, not an error state. Entire civilizations rewired their infrastructure to survive chaos rather than prevent it. Human words entered galactic language. Fallback. Improvisation. Responsibility. On Earth, children grew up knowing the truth of their place in the universe. They were not the strongest. They were not the oldest. They were not the most advanced. They were the ones who kept going. Elena Cross stood once more at the viewing deck of the HSS Resolute, older now, her hair fully grey. Below her, a joint fleet assembled, ships of dozens of species, flying together without rigid formation. It looked messy. It looked alive. Jonah Reed stood beside her, watching traffic move in patterns that would have horrified early Conclave planners. "Do you ever think about how close we came to being ignored forever?" he asked. Elena nodded. "Sometimes." "And does that bother you?" She smiled faintly. "No. It taught us who we are." A message arrived from the Conclave, no longer a command, not even a request. An invitation. A distant system faced total collapse. Ancient defenses were activating without control. Evacuation windows were closing. At the bottom of the message was a simple line. Human consultation requested. Elena forwarded it without comment. Across the galaxy, humans answered similar calls. Not because they were obligated, but because that was what they did. On an administrative station long forgotten by history, Terrelvon prepared his final report before retirement. He looked at the old human file one last time. Species 4, 417C. The original classification still sat there, untouched. Pre-industrial. Negligible. He closed it gently. Outside his viewport, a human ship passed, scarred, patched, alive. It jumped into uncertainty without hesitation. Terrelvon recorded his last annotation, not for the system, but for himself. We thought power was control. Humans taught us power is care under pressure. The galaxy did not worship humanity. It did something far rarer. It trusted them. And that trust reshaped everything. Centuries later, long after names like Conclave and Compact faded into history, a simple truth remained woven into galactic culture. When everything is stable, anyone can govern. When everything is falling apart, you call the humans. Because once, long ago, they were allowed to roam the galaxy. Barely acknowledged. And that was the moment the universe almost missed its greatest superpower. The end.